You know what EMD called it when they launched the SD50 back in May 1981? An upgrade. Yeah, seriously, they slapped that word on there like it meant something. Upgraded from the legendary SD42, the 3,000 horsepower freight workhorse that dominated much of America's heavy railroading through the 70s and built a reputation for reliability. Many railroads liked it, a lot of crews trusted it, and it built a track record for simply working. So when EMD rolled out the SD50 with roughly 500 extra horsepower and new microprocessor-based electronics, a lot of people expected it to be the next big thing. Spoiler alert though, it wasn't. See, the problem started way before these locomotives ever hit the rails. Back at EMD's LaGrange facility in Illinois, where they were assembling these units, something strange was happening. According to at least one later account, SD50s leaving the LaGrange plant often carried inspection reports listing 24 or more defects per unit during testing, roughly 25 at least according to those enthusiast histories. That is not a typo so much as a claim that has been repeated in railfan write-ups ever since. We are talking about brand new locomotives, fresh from the factory, that by those accounts were already coming with defect lists long enough to fill a page. Reports talk about headlights that would not turn on, cooling systems that overheated before they even left the yard, and electrical gremlins everywhere. Some early units reportedly had their deliveries delayed, while EMD tried to sort out the worst of the problems. To people who had to deal with those early units, that was the SD50 launch. A big part of the problem was the 16-cylinder 645F3B engine. EMD took the same basic 645 family concept used in the SD402's reliable 645E3 and pushed it into the new 645F3B, a harder-worked version aimed at more horsepower. Instead of running at 900 revolutions per minute, they pushed it to 950 revolutions per minute. That does not sound like much, right? 50 extra revolutions per minute, big deal. Except it turned out to be a massive deal, because in service the uprated engine at 950 revolutions per minute did not leave much margin for long-term reliability. The crankshaft took a beating, and the power assembly suffered as well. Many railroads saw those high-revving engines shake and fail far more often than the older 900 revolutions per minute versions. Crews later told stories about riding in the cab and feeling the entire locomotive shake, as if it was trying to tear itself apart from the inside. Sometimes serious internal failures really did follow. Crankshaft failures became common enough that shop forces on several railroads remember spending a lot of time and parts keeping SD50 prime movers alive. Canadian National bought 60 of the CAL unit version, the SD50F, and according to later technical summaries, quickly derated them from 3,500 horsepower to around 3,300 in an effort to improve reliability. You buy a brand new locomotive advertised at a certain power rating, and before long you are forced to dial it back because running it flat out proves to be asking for trouble. Those units developed a reputation for spending a lot of time in the shop, dealing with crankshaft and power assembly issues similar to those seen on other SD50s. Conrail went in deep and ordered 135 of these locomotives between 1983 and 1986, giving them the second largest SD50 fleet after CSX. They were wary enough of the HTC trucks after the Amtrak SDP40F derailment controversies that they specified the older FlexiCoil trucks for the first batch. Later, after it became clear the HTC truck itself was not the root cause, they switched to HTC trucks for the second order, but by then, they had bigger issues to worry about. According to later accounts, Conrail engineers would radio in from the road complaining about transition problems, where the electrical system that was supposed to smoothly shift power between the traction motors would freeze up and stall the locomotive in the middle of a run. Coolant systems overheating, headlights that did not work, and the Super Series wheel slip control with its Doppler radar, which was advertised as giving significantly better adhesion. Yes, some crews said that system could go haywire in bad weather and make the speed needle jump all over the place. Several crews reported they were genuinely afraid an axle would overspeed and wreck the whole truck assembly. CSX inherited a massive fleet from both Chessie System and Seaboard System when those railroads merged. Chessie had ordered units numbered in the 8,500 range. B&O got 20 units, C&O got 43, and Seaboard picked up 81. All told, CSX ended up with 144 SD50s, the largest fleet in North America. They started derating them within a few years of putting them to work. The first round of fixes came in the early 90s, when shop records and railfan research indicate they swapped out the governors, dropped maximum RPM from roughly 954 down to around 926, and changed the fuel injector timing. It did not solve the problem, so they came back later and derated them again, this time down to about 3,000 horsepower. By the mid-2000s, CSX had effectively given up on the original high-horsepower concept and had many of the units reclassified as SD52s, a quiet admission that the extra power was not worth the headache. Norfolk Southern had a similar experience with the 20 standard SD50s they inherited from Norfolk and Western, plus the short-frame SD50S prototypes. They were essentially early proof-of-concept units that went into service before the overall SD50 design was fully mature, and it showed. Norfolk Southern eventually got so tired of dealing with them that they started a complete rebuild program at their Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania. They ripped out the 16645 F3B engine and replaced it with a rebuilt 16645 Series Prime mover, a design with a much stronger reliability record. They basically turned SD50s into SD42 style locomotives because the original high-revving concept had proved that fragile. Meanwhile, General Electric was cleaning up. Their Dash 7 line, particularly the C30-7, racked up on the order of 1,100 units. EMD's SD50? Around 430 units were built for North America, plus a relatively small number of related variants. Production started in 1981 and wrapped up in January 1986, and sources note that EMD offered deep discounts on some large SD50 orders just to keep the model moving. Railroads often bought them because the price and horsepower looked attractive on paper, not because the SD50 had proven itself in long-term service. By the mid-1980s, industry sales tables were starting to tilt in GE's favor, and in the decades that followed, GE would generally lead EMD in new locomotive orders. The SD50 did not just stumble as a product, it became the model that symbolized the end of EMD's effortless stranglehold on the North American locomotive market. When the SD50 actually worked, a lot of crews liked it. The wheel slip control, when it was not glitching out, was reported to provide noticeably better adhesion than an SD40-2. The dynamic brakes were powerful, relocated from the center of the hood to right behind the cab, where they ran cooler and more efficiently. But none of that mattered when the locomotive developed a reputation for spending far too much time in the shop getting repaired. Reliability beats raw performance every single time in railroad operations, and the SD50's reliability record just could not keep up. EMD followed up quickly with the SD60, new 710G engine back down to about 900 RPM, and more mature computer-controlled electrical systems that generally worked the way railroads expected. The SD60 hit the market in 1984, barely 3 years after the SD50 launched, and while it did not completely restore EMD's reputation, at least it was a functional locomotive. Railroads that had been loyal EMD customers for generations started looking at GE's offerings with a lot more interest. Today, most SD50 locomotives are gone, scrapped, rebuilt beyond recognition, or sitting dead on storage tracks somewhere. CSX kept roughly 14 units as SD50-3 rebuilds with even more extensive work, but even those are essentially one major failure away from the scrapyard. Norfolk Southern finished their SD40E program and turned almost 60 SD50 locomotives into what are essentially brand new SD40-2 locomotives with modern cabs. At least one SD50 has been preserved and close to its original form. Chicago and Northwestern number 7009 at the Illinois Railway Museum still wears its factory Zito yellow paint from 1985. That's the SD50 story. EMD's so-called upgrade that many railroads grew to resent, that developed a reputation for constant failures, that had to be derated or completely rebuilt just to keep running, and that helped open the door for GE to take the lead in the locomotive market. Some upgrade, right?